grace I embrace. You're calling me, I'm coming home. You're calling me, I'm coming home. Beautifully made by nature, I've fallen. By grace I've been raised. You're calling me, I'm coming home. You're calling me, I'm coming home. We are no longer strangers to your arms. We are no longer strangers to your arms. By your grace you have saved us. We're no longer strangers. We're no longer strangers to your arms. Once exiled by sin, separated by my transgression, now welcome in. You're calling me, I'm coming home. You're calling me, I'm coming home. We are no longer safe place when I'm weak. You are always near when I'm in need. Though the earth give way and mountains fall into
morning, everyone. Hey, just want to give you a couple quick announcements before we get started. Next week, we are going to go live, actually have a live stream of our service, and we'll have the band and the sermon all in one room at the church, and we'll live stream that to YouTube and to Facebook. So pay attention to that. Next week, we're excited about that. We're testing out some things, so also practice grace and forgiveness, because we might screw up a little bit, but we're going to give it a shot. So that's next week, and that'll go live at 10:30. And then really exciting news that Rebecca shared last week, that we will actually be coming together, those that can and are up for it, for Easter Sunday. We'll have our very first in-person service in over a year in the building, and we're very excited about that. Those of you who cannot attend due to health reasons and precautions, we totally understand that. And that is, we support you in that decision. And that's one of the reasons why we're also testing our live feed, so you can feel like you're with us. It's really important for us. So be paying attention for our Easter service. We will require registration for you to come, and there'll be some safety protocols that we will put in our newsletter, email newsletter, and it'll also be on our website. So pay attention to those. All right. So I recently just went and had a doctor's appointment that was like way long overdue. I don't know if you're like me and avoid those appointments, but I get there, and the nurse, as they do, they're checking all your stats, your blood pressure, and she looked concerned when she checked my blood pressure, and she checked it a few times and dimmed the lights a few times and asked me to relax and take deep breaths and think calm thoughts. And, like that's supposed to help in some way. But then she put this big, large laminated sign on the doctor's desk, and it read, "Recheck blood pressure, dangerously high." And she left. Well, my doc came in, and, he rechecks it, and he's like, "Hey, your blood pressure is 170 over 110. But I said, no, don't worry. I feel fine. Like, I'm totally fine. I feel normal. No problem. No problem. That's my baseline, doc. We're good. It's okay. It's all right." He's like, "You feel good?" I'm like, "Yeah, I feel great. No worries." And the doctor didn't say that, "Okay, Dave, you feel fine? Great. No problem. We'll see you next year." No, because he had like data to determine that having a blood pressure of 170, 110, over 110 is like a really bad thing. However, we often see sort of this view that what you think is right for you. What it means for me to love you and support you in that thing that you think is right is for me to just say, "Okay, you're right. So everyone's good. What's good for you is good for you." And that wasn't the case when I go to my doctor. And that's not really the case in life either. But this is kind of the culture that we're in. This is of course, this idea is called moral relativism. And before we get going, this talk is almost like 3 talks in one, but we're going to try to get through it today. I want to define right away what moral relativism is that it's saying that there is no such thing as a universal right or wrong. Individuals and cultures are free to form their own moral truths. And thus, truths are always correct because there are no objective moral truths to compare them to. This way of thinking and acting has gotten into our institutions, into our schools, into universities, our companies we work for, and even our churches. Nietzsche, the philosopher, he said, "To will your own desire as law." So we live in this culture of moral relativism, and then we've moved from this idea, this liberating culture that we have, where free love and just free everything, to this like condemning culture. So what we do is We throw off the constraints of right and wrong, and we're free to create whatever we feel is right or wrong inside of us. And now we live in a world where then we condemn for that. We live in a world of condemnation. And if you don't accept my vision for the world that I've created that is right, then you stand on the wrong side of history and you're in danger of being canceled. This ultimately leads to like moral confusion. Right and wrong moves into opinion within you. You follow your heart, not the will of God, not the Creator. You do you as long as it doesn't hurt anyone. But in order to understand what is harm, we need to understand what's good and evil. We say love is love without any authority of what love is. Then when someone doesn't support me in my love that I've created myself in the way that I think it should be, I then condemn them and they are now my enemy. We first actually need to find a source for moral authority. How did we get from like survival of the fittest idea all the way to Black Lives Matter? It doesn't make sense. It's not consistent. You can only get to racial justice from Genesis chapter 1. All human beings are created in the image of God. There's a source. We're attempting to live with no sacred order or transcendent moral authority beyond ourselves. Douglas Murray, he's an author and politician, and he describes himself as an atheist. He says this in a recent book that he wrote: all of our grand narratives have collapsed in Western society. Religion went first, and then political ideologies went next in this postmodern era, which is defined by its suspicion towards all grand narratives. And this has led to a breakdown of the modern project. And then he writes this quote: people in wealthy Western democracies today could not simply remain the first people in recorded history to have absolutely no explanation for what we are doing here and no story to give life purpose. This is someone who doesn't claim at all to be a Christian. He even acknowledges that we're the first society to try to find meaning in life within ourselves, and it's not working. It is breaking down everywhere. And my point in all of this is I think that we need to restore a sacred order, because what we have right now is it's not working. It's the difference between sort of this idea of oneism and twoism. Oneism is based solely on your one opinion and that you're creating things out of oneself. Twoism is which is sort of written in our code, in our DNA, and we do it with our Creator. It seems like our world is becoming less moral and more moral all at the same time. We just don't know where we're aiming at. Like, for example, with race, we have had a moment here of racial reckoning in our country. It's been a long time coming, with the killing of Eric Gardner, Michael Brown, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. It seems like our nation is moving towards human rights. And this is right, and this is good, and it is so needed. But where is the North Star of morality when it comes to human rights? What is it based on? What are we aiming for? How do we know when we hit it? How do we know if we actually became more moral in terms of race in our nation? How do we become more moral honoring the standard human rights? How do we make sure that people aren't using racial rights and racial reconciliation as some sort of Trojan horse for some new ideology to come in? Like, where's the fulcrum? Where's the fulcrum attached to for the moral hinge? You know, where's the fulcrum for race and and marriage and sexuality and gender and equality and our bodies, is it connected to oneism or is it connected to twoism? For the follower of Jesus, that fulcrum we live by is God and his authority. And specifically, the teaching of Jesus, who is the fullness and revelation of God, and the word Jesus has called upon us in a culture of moral relativism is holiness. You see, holiness will be the thing we're aiming for. Holiness is what it'll feel like when we follow Jesus. Holiness is our bodies, is our mind. Holiness sets us apart. Now, one of the most repeated commands in all of Scripture is, be holy as I am holy. This is what God says over and over and over again throughout the Bible. Be holy as I am holy. Now, I don't know what the term holy or holiness stirs up in you, especially if you grew up in the church. For some, the word may stir up this idea of some kind of caste system of Christianity where there are people who are more holier than you, and you are never achieve that, and that you've always felt less. For some of you, you've just felt like holiness is a goal that I can never attain, and I'm not even going to strive, and you've just given up. But as a follower of Jesus, we choose to be a community of holiness while living in a culture of moral relativism. Apprenticing to Jesus' way of life means that we follow his mental maps to reality. He's our transcendent moral authority. The more we align our life to the teachings of Jesus, to his mental maps to reality, the more we flourish and thrive in relationship with God and others. And the reverse is also true. The more we turn away our life with Jesus, the more we show up in reality in such a way that we actually struggle and suffer. There's a philosopher he's a British philosopher, H. Farmer. He put it, if you go against the grain of the universe, you get splinters. That said, it's so important to keep in mind that this all doesn't put on us, as followers of Jesus, at odds with the host culture. It just puts us out of place in our host culture, on both the left and the right. Holiness means to be set apart. It's not just about behavior, but it's about an inner life. Holiness is about our whole body. So how do we be a community of holiness in a culture of moral relativism? Well, one of the things that we can do is we can actually develop a practice of fasting. Fasting seeks to rescue us from a culture whose views of the body right now is low, and to put us into a worldview in which our bodies are the very temple of God. What we do and don't do with them actually matters because we matter. Fasting then becomes a practice from the life and teachings of Jesus that sets us up to starve the flesh and feed the spirit, to amplify our prayers, and to stand in solidarity with the poor. Fasting is a way of praying with our whole bodies as we partner with God to usher in his kingdom to our world. Now, I know fasting can be another word and thing that stirs some stuff up that might not be healthy for you. I know I've often in the past said I'm going to fast, and it really wasn't motivating me to fast and pray. It was motivating me. I wanted to lose some weight, right? And sometimes we have different motivations for that. But I want to encourage you, for those of you who have some baggage with fasting, or even have just some questions about it, I want to recommend two books to you today. One is called Fasting: The Ancient Practices by Scott McKnight, and the other book is called God's Chosen Fast by Arthur Wallis. And I'll put those in the comments. I want to encourage you actually to think about and pray about fasting, to make a plan. Don't just do it willy-nilly. Don't just make a plan. Choose, I'm gonna fast 1 day a week, or I'm gonna fast 2 days a week. I'm gonna fast from dinner to dinner one day, or I'm gonna skip lunch, or When the sun, I'm going to do sun up to sundown fast. Build in time during that fast to pray, to stop, to slow down, to listen. Let's be a community that is moving towards holiness in a culture of moral relativism by fasting and praying with our whole bodies. Let's go be the church.